Welcome back to A Valid Answer with Scott and Marshall, where a pastor and an atheist duke it out, spank each other back and forth. Wait, that doesn't sound very good, does it?
No, but I am going to spank you.
You're not going to spank me today. That's not what's going to happen. That's not how it's going to happen. You can catch us here at 5 o'clock every Sunday night, 5 o'clock at kerncast.com. Find us on A Valid Answer at Facebook. You can follow our podcast on iTunes Podcast. Search for A Valid Answer. Oh, yeah, let me make sure I reload that there. And so tell us a little bit what happened this week that sparked this spanking debate.
I actually don't remember.
There's a Facebook post.
I know, yes. So always a Facebook post, right? I think I did. I had a couple of friends on my timeline actually post pro spanking comments.
Oh, really? Okay, so I didn't see those because they were on your timeline. Mm-hmm. Got it.
And so kind of as a subtle response to my friends, I think I put up a clinical study, and it was actually, I think it was an aggregation of a sort of a survey of other studies. And the conclusion drawn from all of these aggregated studies is that spanking is in no way positive. It's ineffective, it does not work, and the outcomes are bad. So it's not even an effective form of punishment. Mm-hmm. So the question, of course, is why are we still spanking our children? It's just not a good idea, but we continue to do it. 2/3 of parents still spank their kids. I have 2 children of my own, 18 and 5, and I have never spanked either one of them, not once.
I have 3 children of my own, 17, 15, and 7, and I have spanked 2 of them, never had to spank the third.
And it's interesting now because I will admit, because I know your kids and you know my kids.
This is being produced, by the way, awkwardly by one of my children who's going to be listening to me talk about, how I used to spank them.
Interestingly, all of our kids have turned out to be great kids.
Yes.
They're really great. They're really well behaved. They're respectful. Even my 5-year-old son, he acts right. You can take him places and do things. It's going to be interesting to go head to head on this topic because we've both had positive outcomes, and we know a lot of people out there.
Which, by the way, your research says I shouldn't have.
Not necessarily. I don't think the research says that 100% of the cases. But the real question is there really a reason to do it when there are other techniques available? Mm-hmm.
I believe yes, it works. I believe that my kids show that it works, and I believe that the different personalities of kids, like I said, I spanked my children, but as it turns out, one of them didn't need it. Never got to the point with one of them where they needed to be spanked. So I believe that the personality of the child is going to have a bearing on that, because unless you're saying that every child is the same.
No, children are different, under no circumstances do I think we should be spanking children.
Okay, but
I don't think children have positive outcomes because of spanking. I think you see positive outcomes in children in spite of spanking. I myself would say that I am an example of that. I was spanked as a child, and you can debate whether or not I've turned out in a positive way, but certainly I would think it's in spite of the fact that I was spanked and not because of it.
So like a good friend, when you posted that, I read it. And immediately found the issues with it, and I posted on that comment saying, "Yes, if you
not a single meme, I was just like, forget it."
Yeah, I said that's great. If you choose to ask the question in the way you choose it, you can get whatever result you want in your survey. If you ask the question or aim the question the way you want to get your result. So yes, I believe that result was clearly gotten because of the direction and the choice of how they were aggregating everything. In fact, there's another website on here that I went and found that shows that like 71 out of the 73 tests that they do, or there were four that actually followed a good 4 or 11. I got to go back and look at the numbers, but basically it was like 70 to 11 or 70 to 4, to where the minority of them were done in such a way that it was good procedure in testing it. And the majority of them were breaking all kinds of, they're hitting fallacies and breaking all kinds of procedure in the studies, and not what's the word I'm looking for? They weren't proper. There are studies that weren't properly done, but that's the majority of them. So the majority of the answers gave them this answer, even though the majority of them were not properly done in the right way. So then people like the guy who went on there on that first one that you posted, it's like, yep, see, the verdict's in. Most of them agree that it's bad for them. It's like, well, yeah, but most of them broke all these rules and how the studies were done. Mm-hmm. They weren't.
Well, spanking isn't something that's actually standardized.
Right, exactly, and that's the issue. How do you define spanking? You can get the results you want in your survey by how you define spanking.
And then so there's another study I found, and it was also sort of an aggregation of 75 different studies published in Scientific American. And one of the things that they corrected for, because when they looked at all these studies, they found that some people spanked with objects, other people spanked with a hand, and there was just such a wide variety of techniques.
Has anybody studied the techniques versus each other?
Yes.
Okay.
So what they did was they corrected for the different techniques, such as hitting a child on the bottom with an open hand increases the risk that kids will develop emotional and behavioral problems.
Yeah.
Okay. But they also dealt with when you used like an item or tool, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so in none of these surveys did it find that spanking produced a beneficial effect. They limited their meta-analysis to studies that evaluated the effects of spanking, slapping, and hitting children without the use of objects, and found that spanking is still associated with negative outcomes. They also compared the results from cross-sectional studies with results from longitudinal studies, which track the kid's behavior over time, better able to tease out cause and effect. And they found that spanking is associated with negative outcomes in both types of studies, which strengthens the argument that spanking poses risks.
Right, and this is the article that I read on here where they said there were 75 studies of the latest, 75 studies, 71 of which suffered from 3 major fallacies, any one of which would be a fatal flaw. But 4 of them, the 4 that didn't suffer from those fallacies, did show that it was beneficial.
Okay, so what are the benefits of spanking?
The benefits of spanking are to associate the pain of the spanking with the behavior so that it's not repeated. Now, when and why you spank, I believe that there's reasonable ways to do that, and never in anger. Just like any punishment, doesn't matter if it's spanking or timeout or sit down or be quiet, whatever you're doing. No punishment should ever be issued in anger. It should be issued, dispassionately. This is why.
Sober as a judge, huh?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do in the meantime, or what do you do if you need immediate compliance?
That's what I'm saying. When you start early, immediate compliance, there physically is there is not an issue of non-compliance because they're whatever, you sit them down, you put them in the car seat, you hold on to them, they're small enough to be held, and then you talk them through and talk them down and say, this is what's happening, here's what's going on, we're going to be doing this, and because you did this, now you have to get a spanking. And why? In my household, spanking was disobedience, just straight up disobedience. Anything else, there was no spanking, there was no anger. And it was clearly stated out. This is the punishment for you're going to disobey. That actually became a very famous line around our house that I don't know if Gabriel will remember or not. But it would be, I'd look at him and say, "Are you being disobedient?" And they'd be like, "No." Okay, so we're going to comply here. We're going to do this. Okay. But it was just that, "Are you being disobedient?" And they're like, "Oh, disobedience is spanking." No. Okay, sorry. It was like a reset button. Are you being disobedient? No. Okay, so now let's talk it through and let's see what's going on. But it was only for disobedience. Just flat out, we're doing no, you don't say no to mom. You don't say no to dad. Let's go over here. No, even like physical disobedience. Hey, we're going over here. No, and sitting down and pouting and saying, I'm not going to be picked up. I'm not going to be. No, that's defiance. That's disobedience. That's a spanking. Okay. Everything else was, whatever. Timeout, toy taken away. You're not going to watch. But I don't even know. I mean, I'm going to put him on the spot right now. I'm sorry, Gabriel. I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't even know if Gabriel remembers being spanked. Because most of our spanking years were done by 2 or 3 years old. They just got it. There was a compliance that was done that there was no need after that. It was, are you being, they understood the defiance, disobedience is this. Are you being disobedient? No. Are you being disobedient? You know, there was that, and there was no need. Again, one of my children, we spanked a little bit. One of my children, we had to spank quite a bit more because they were much more strong-willed. And then another child was so soft-willed naturally that we never had to spank that child. I think my wife has spanked that child one time with a spoon on their bottom. I'm trying to be as generic as possible, so I'm not giving away which kids were which. But because of their different personalities, one of them at a younger age was much, much, much more strong-willed. That would.
Were you also younger?
What's that?
Were you also younger?
What do you mean?
Never mind. I don't want to, because I don't want anyone to identify the kids. So we're going to skip that question. I think my question here is, we've got two sets of kids. One was spanked, one was not spanked, but they both have a positive outcome, or so it seems to be. But maybe spanking isn't the magic ingredient. Maybe the magic ingredient that we both share is consistency, starting early, starting often, and consistency. And if that's the case, then can't we just apply Occam's razor and do away with the spanking part and have other methods of discipline? Because you seem to be a fairly effective disciplinarian.
Yeah.
And I believe I am as well.
But when you're dealing with an 18-month-old who doesn't understand reason, you can't reason with a child who doesn't understand reason. But a pain on the bottom to this action is memorable and done. Ended. It's once done. They associate, whatever you want to do, Pavlov's dog or whatever the thing.
Pavlovian classical conditioning.
It's just added, because how much reasoning can you do with a child that doesn't understand?
Well,
all
it's
of the
difficult
words?
even for teenagers to reason. The logic center of the brain doesn't fully wire until age 25.
But at least they understand language. At least they understand what words mean.
But there are other ways.
You can have discussions. You at a certain age, there is no understanding of what you're saying. There is no understanding.
But like little kids understand things like, for example, pick up your toys so nobody steps on them and breaks them. I've always tried to offer a reason for a directive.
But
because
again,
even though it's not going to be absorbed, it will be absorbed later on. Later on, they will come to appreciate and understand that when Dad says there's a reason.
Again, I don't associate the discipline with the toys on the ground. I don't spank them because their toys are on the ground. I didn't spank them because they spilled milk. I didn't spank them because they didn't do their chores. I didn't spank them because their room wasn't clean. It was simply, okay, at this moment right now, we're going to do this. And if it was straight up defiance, no. Okay, you need to do it. No. Well, no is disobedience. No is defiance. And there will not be defiance. I mean, right now, I talked to my kids. It was a few years ago, but I asked them. They were already teenagers. And I said, can you, because they saw their friends some of their friends acting with their parents. And it's unfathomable to my teenagers that they could talk back to me. It's just so, and that's from 3 years old. From 3 years old, there's just this, you don't talk back to dad. You don't talk back to mom. And I've got teenagers who don't talk back to me. We have conversations. We have deep, meaningful conversations because they know that that's not an option. I mean, will I spank them right now? No, but it's been so rooted in them that I don't have to from a young age.
Well, I think that's definitely a magic ingredient. You have to start when they're basically toddlers.
Yeah.
And you have to be very firm and very consistent, and you have to be on top of it.
And if you do that, it won't go beyond toddlers.
Exactly. And I agree with you there because that's been my experience as well. And I think that's what the experts would say. And I do welcome people to chime in here.
Yep.
But here's my question. What would you say then to all of these parents who are out there who are spanking outside of those very narrow parameters that you've specified for your household? Which, by the way, I don't condone those parameters either. I still think that's one step too far in my opinion. However, you are pretty darn mild when it comes to spanking compared to most of the people that I know out there who are using objects. I mean, holy cow, it's called the chancla in Espanol, right? You know, the sandal, right? You know,
right? I mean, it's almost a joke. I mean, it's sad that it's almost a joke. But on that note, it was always with an object, because I never wanted these hands to be associated with giving them pain. It was always the belt. It was, you knew.
But wait, you just said these kids couldn't reason that out.
Right.
So is that more for your sanity or for their benefit?
No, that's association. That's basic association.
Okay.
I'm not going to have a 3-year-old who sees a hand and flinches from my hand. They're never going to get that association. That can start at, whatever. If you start smacking your child at 6 months old, they're going to understand that hand means pain.
Okay. But what about
the basic association? You don't use your hands, because basic association, they will associate the pain with the hand. And I don't ever want to do that.
Okay. But now what about all these other parents out there? So do you condone spanking the way that it's performed by, 2/3 of the population out there?
No. Because
I don't know anybody else who has such a very strict and narrow criteria for physical discipline that you have.
And no, I don't. Anytime I don't condone any type of punishment that's done in anger. When you are passionate and angry, that is not the time to carry out punishment. That is not the time to say, well, then, even as a teenager, well, fine, you're grounded for 2 weeks. Well, that may not be a reasonable, and now you're just going to be viewed as an unreasonable parent to that child, to that teenager. Nothing. I mean, okay, I will give this example, and I will name names. Sorry, children.
All right.
Because it was just so out of the ordinary. Gabriel remembers this. I think you're gonna laugh, but it was like 3:00 in the morning. And the kid's bedroom is on literally the other side of the house. And I woke up in the middle of the night. I had to use the restroom, and I'm walking, and I'm like, I thought I saw a light on underneath our door. So I open up the door, and I see like a light on the other side of the house. I'm like, it's 3:00 in the morning. What's going on? I like walk over there, and I could hear, like, are they watching a movie? What's going on? And I walk over, and this was only a couple of years ago. So they were teenagers at the time. And I walk down the hall, and I see light underneath their door. And I walk down, and I open up the door, and there's one of my sons on the Xbox, projected on the wall, playing the game with my other son, watching him play, and my, at the time, like 5-year-old daughter sitting on the bed, watching. Like 3:00 in the morning, they were all
playing games.
And I look, I go, what? And
kids.
My daughter looks at me like, and she smiles. She doesn't, like, what's the big deal? I heard the game. I woke up and I'm like, what's going on? And the son who was playing, who's like, caught. He's like, look at me. I'm all right. We're going to deal with this tomorrow. Everybody get to bed. I am not going to deal with this right now. Just turn it all off.
Well, you won't be able to go back to sleep once you do.
Yeah, turn it all off. Everybody get in bed. I will talk to you guys in the morning. Is that basically what happened? Yeah, I'm all, because my mind's like, I'm upset right now, but now is not the time to deal out punishment. Just everybody get to bed. We will talk about this tomorrow. And then we dealt out, okay, well, now you can't be on this for so many days. And, I didn't in that moment. What are you doing? And start smacking him and pull my belt and whipping him. That's not
I think
parenting.
You're proving my whole case here, by the way.
Right. But because they're teenagers, because I did spanking and discipline until they were about 3 and didn't need it anymore. So it was no longer a necessary form of punishment, because then they could understand what was going on. They already had it in their mind that I don't disobey. I don't talk back to
my and again, I want to get back to you. I don't think the positive outcome is attributable to the discipline, the spanking, I should say.
But obviously
it's attributable to
negative
the
outcomes,
consistency.
But obviously negative outcomes are not necessarily attributed, because there would be negative outcomes with them if spanking alone was the problem.
Yeah, but the thing is you are not average. There are a lot of people out there who are going to dole out, spankings for all sorts of, minor infractions. Yeah. Sometimes to children who are far too young, in my opinion. I don't think a child, I just don't think a kid should be spanked, period. I don't know at which age spanking is appropriate, but I have heard of people spanking babies even. And to me, that really is in a very bad place. And spankings have been given out to much older kids too.
The very first spanking I had to do, the nurse told me, and I was like, okay, spank their foot, Mom. Like that. And she's like, no, you got to smack them. They got to feel that. You got to make them cry. I'm like, okay. Like, and they needed him to cry to get the snot out of his nose or whatever. I mean, literally, he's like 2 minutes old. But I was like, okay. Sorry.
So Josh here has something to say. He says, interesting discussion so far. Thank you, Josh. I was not a fan of spanking growing up, and I'm often surprised at how negatively it impacted him. Mm-hmm. And it impacted me myself negatively as well, I feel. Scott's point of view on this is different than most parents I know. I appreciate the dispassionate aspect. That was never my personal experience.
Yeah, and again, thank you, Josh. It's not, I'm not even talking about spanking right now. I'm just saying any type of punishment should not be dealt out in the moment. That's very immature thinking. I mean, that is being the judge and setting the execution date before you hear the evidence. Mm-hmm. You just don't do that.
Well, arguably, sometimes you don't need to hear the evidence, or maybe there's a situation where you need immediate compliance because there's a dangerous situation.
Right, and again,
how do you handle that?
I never had the problem with, I know they're going to obey me. It's actually a funny moment because my wife grew up in a household where where she was spanked, and with very similar rules, very similar things growing up. You say it's uncommon. It's all that I've experienced. That's the way my parents did it. That's the way her parents did it. And we just happened to meet, I guess, and happened to come for the thing. But there was a time because they had been disciplining her that she was a toddler, and they were at a park and they turn around and she's walking towards the street, 100 feet away or whatever, because they're playing at the park. And her dad just said, "Jennifer, sit." And she's like, "Oh." It's like, "Oh, he said that, what? Okay." And she's like, "Now what?" It was just because they had already invested in the discipline of you do what we say.
Exactly.
And the consistency and those types of, so many things can be averted if you teach your children to do what the parents say.
But what happens then if your kid, I mean, a lot of people, like my parents didn't know better.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case even for a lot of my friends out there. A lot of my friends are just raising their kids the way they were raised.
Yeah.
And they look at themselves and think, well, I turned out okay. I got some spankings, but I turned out just fine.
But what's
really the harm?
But again, what is the harm? What are the studies saying? Are the studies saying that people come out violent criminals because they got spanked? I mean, what?
Well, there's no positive outcomes that I'm aware of. There are no positive outcomes. So right there, regardless of whether they come out to be felons or upstanding citizens, there are no positive outcomes. There's no need to do this because just like I think you have demonstrated, perhaps inadvertently, is its consistency and to be dispassionate, to judge without anger, and to apply a fair, firm, and consistent discipline to every situation. I think that's the magic key, not the spanking part. Okay. And again, I feel that people turn out okay in spite of the fact they are spanked, not because of it. I have never seen a study, not one study, that connects being spanked to positive outcomes later in life.
I'm trying to find it because I came across 4 of them.
Okay, well, that's interesting. But 4 out of how many hundreds?
Right, and the other ones were shown why. Again, I'm going back to that. There was 75 studies listed on here. 71 suffered from fallacies. The 4 that didn't showed positive outcomes.
But what are the odds that parents are going to get this wrong?
True.
Okay, and so given that, perhaps the better solution, the message that we need to send to everybody is just don't do it. Because even if your formula is safe and fine, and it appears to be in your case, granted it's anecdotal evidence, even if your formula is the one and only formula for spanking that works, how many people know the formula and are going to apply it and are going to apply it from a young age consistently and then stop applying it when the child is no longer a toddler? How many people are going to raise their kids like you did? Not very many. Mm-hmm. Again, many people need a way to effectively discipline their children when they get out of line, especially when they're older. Yeah. What do you do if you've had this epiphany now? Your kid is in junior high or an adult. You've had the epiphany that spanking is a really bad thing to do to your kids. You now suddenly agree with Marshall. What do I do now, though? Because my kids were brought up with being spanked, and what do we do now?
Well, I mean, they're junior high. Why are you spanking them?
Right, but again, I think it's because parents don't have the tools. Mm-hmm. And we're not teaching these tools. We're not teaching in school because we don't assume that teenagers are going to have children.
We used to spank them in schools.
Well,
and
we did that.
You had much more disciplined children, didn't you?
No, I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna.
I'm-
They still spank in schools in some
Right.
parts of the country.
And how are the children there?
I'm not gonna say that. I don't know.
I'm
I
not-
don't have data on this, and I'm
right,
not going to
and I'm
suggest
not-
to you.
And I'm not trying to say that
it's positive.
That correlation equals causation. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, as a meme, I'm just saying what has changed in society when children didn't used to act out like this. What has changed in society? That children act out way more, are much more.
I don't know that they act out more.
Oh heck yeah!
Oh no! It's a common misperception. We always look at the past with rose-colored glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And if we were to go to our parents would look at the past, and our grandparents would look at the past, and every generation before ours was so much better behaved.
No, how many teachers have been beat up by students in the past? Seriously.
I don't know, but it's happened. I mean, heck, I
Not
remember
like
reading.
It happens nowadays.
I remember as a child,
Not like it happens nowadays.
I read the Little
That's
House on the
obvious.
Prairie series, and the schoolmaster in that book, which was a memoir by Laura Ingalls Wilder, got beat up by a student. This was in the 1880s, 1890s. So, I mean, teachers have been brutalized by their students on occasion, but that's because the students have issues. Again, I don't think that corporal punishment is a solution for any kind of behavioral problem. I don't see how it improves a behavioral outcome. I just don't.
Can you do me a favor? I can't, for whatever reason, yours shows the whole post and mine doesn't. Can you read some of these responses here? Because I'm trying to find this.
Sure. Okay, I want to. I had from Josh said that he had discipline misapplied to him in the heat of the moment at one point, and it was such an injustice to his 10-year-old self that it undermined any real growth for him. Mm-hmm. It resulted in him trying to hide things from his parents. Yes, children do learn to become sneaky.
Yeah.
Because they want to avoid the punishment. And Virginia says, I agree that spanking in anger is a terrible idea. Therefore, since I wait to discipline until I'm not angry, I don't feel the need to spank. So I think what it is we have to make available to people better tools.
Well, it says here, goodparent.org. I finally found it. In their conclusion, goodparent.org, you can check out this. I'll see if we can copy and paste the link into there. In a positive family setting, spanking has been found to be a positive predictor of outcome.
Okay.
That it's a positive predictor that in a positive family setting, those who spanked showed positive outcomes in the children.
Okay. Now I'm not going to get into you with what that means, and I'm not going to dissect it. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that's correct. Again, how many of the 2/3 of parents out there who are spanking are
doing it right,
or doing it in this way?
So we should suggest not doing it at all instead of teaching them how to do it right.
Probably because that's safer than saying, you know what, do it, but just within these parameters. Because again, when people get physical with one another,
but when you say it's safer. It's safer in the moment. But what kind of children are you creating by not disciplining?
I think my children are okay, and your children are pretty good. And I think we're pushing it to say that your children are spanked. I think we're pushing it.
No, there was for the time that we had to. Literally, I got a call at work from my wife with one of our children, and it was literally like, I've already spanked him.
You spanked your kids so few times you remember the one instance when you did it.
No. I'm saying I remember my wife calling and saying, I've already spanked him twice today for the same thing, and he's still doing it. Do I spank him again?
Obviously not.
And I said, if he's being disobedient, then yes, you have to.
Wow.
And it was during that time. But again, that was between 2 and 3, and since then, it's never happened again.
Okay. But I think it's the consistency.
I think it's the personality. Again, it's the personality of the child.
Mm-hmm.
I've met your children. They're very non-aggressive children.
Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that spanking teaches is aggression.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
Didn't teach my children aggression.
No, but it's in all of these studies. It's one of the number one side effects of spanking is aggression.
It did not teach my children aggression. That's what I'm saying. And again, those studies have fallacies in how they're recording their information on what they're doing, how they're defining spanking. They can't even define what spanking is. That's the whole thing that's listed.
Well, that's because each study is different.
Exactly. The whole thing, they're not even defining what spanking is. They're saying a general, spanking in general, when there is a way to do it that produces a good outcome, especially when you have
how many people are following
child.
that formula?
Then let's teach them to follow that formula.
Or maybe let's teach them
and again,
tools
maybe they don't
that
have
don't
to.
require physical contact.
I have a child that did not require spanking. That their personality was such that they just naturally never disobeyed us.
Okay.
And so I'm saying, when you have one of those children, then yes, your method works great. What happens if you have a strong-willed child?
You have to outlast them.
Did you have a strong-willed child?
My kids have had moments, both of them,
but
where they were strong-willed.
Did you have a
and there are
strong-willed
other
child?
tools that I don't know how we define strong-willed child.
Okay.
But I have had moments,
and there are different tools.
With my daughter, went through a phase where she threw fits that would last for hours. But you have to outlast them. You can't be lazy.
No. It's nothing lazy about it.
You have to endure, and you have to outlast them.
Yes. Let me tell you a story. I had to endure with my children that they were being in the middle of a family party. And they were acting out and crying and being disobedient. But, well, here, listen, no. I'm like, I took them over. They weren't quite two. Took them into a room and held on. Now listen. I held on and said, now listen. This is what's going to happen. You're going, no, I'm not going to. Yes, you're going to listen. And I just whispered in their ear while holding them. And they were kicking, screaming. And I was just whispering in their ear, you will not win. You will learn that you will listen to mom and dad. And I was just calmly holding them. It exhausted me for 25 minutes holding this child.
And I think that's how you have to do it.
Yeah. And I've done that. That was a moment that I've done it. And they learned.
And I think the same thing applies even if they're older.
Yeah.
Even if they're older, there are different ways of doing it. You're not going to literally physically hold them down. But there are different ways to be on top of them.
When you physically hold them down as a child, when you physically do that in that loving way of like, you will learn that this is, when you do that as a child, you don't have to do that when they're 7, when they're 10, when they're 14. You don't have to.
Yeah, but for the parent where the genie's, the horse is out of the barn or what have you. Yeah. Trying to find the right analogy. Yeah. There's all these
Genie's
different
out of
analogies.
The bottle. Hey, are we missing any more comments? I'm not keeping up. We're having great conversation, guys. I love this. It's just for whatever reason on my iPad, it only shows like the first line. It says see more, and I try to tap see more, and it doesn't. It says respond.
So we've got one here from Claudia.
Because of my mother's religion, Claudia, she whipped me with whatever she could find. For example, switches, extension cords, wooden spoons for taking kids, for talking to kids who weren't in her religion. Did I read that right?
She's trying to get people. It was her way of breaking people into religious submission. It
was her form to break me to religious. Okay, so I began to sneak around and hide things from my mom. So that's very similar to what Josh Gunderson was saying. Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. Oh, so did you read that one already?
No.
Okay. So
and now Josh has another one here, but
you can actually see more on yours. That's great. Scott, your form of spanking differs from most spanking parents I've known. Most have experience closer with Claudia and Art. Okay, so maybe we did read those. I'm sorry. I looked like they were going through there. But what I'm saying is that what you said does make my point in that, yes, there are different tools for different moments. Mm-hmm. There are some moments where the tool is a spanking. Mm-hmm. Not every moment. And I didn't use it for every moment. And I didn't use that tool for everything that happens. And I happen to have a child who just does not have the strong will that required that tool ever from me. Mm-hmm. It never got to the position that child just never got to that point where they were disobedient, and that tool didn't need to be used. Mm-hmm. It's reasoning. You have to use reason, and it's a tool that works in some cases that works better than any other tool available. And it's efficient, and it gets it done, and it works, but it's not the tool you use every time. You don't just say, I'm a hammer, and everything looks like a nail. Mm-hmm.
Because there are a lot of parents who take that approach.
And they shouldn't.
Kids out of line, spanking. The kid says something wrong, spanking. Kids not going to sleep, spanking. Kid won't eat their dinner, spanking. They really think that it's the go-to punishment to ensure compliance, and all that teaches is resentment and pain and suffering. And let me remind you, your kids pick your retirement home.
But why not have multiple tools for multiple situations? Because
I agree. You should have multiple tools.
Using your same logic, we should never put anybody in jail, because somebody might Put them in jail for crossing the street. Put them in jail for jaywalking. Put them in jail
it's a
for
straw
this.
man argument.
No, but I'm saying it's the same thinking. If you only if it's bad, if it can be used bad, then nobody should be able to use it. That's a bad argument.
No.
If it's
spanking
a tool that can
produces
be used,
negative effects.
not every time.
And we're dealing with
Not
children,
every
not
time.
adults.
Not every time. Obviously.
Obviously, not every time.
Not every time.
But the circumstances under which spanking may have an arguably beneficial effect, and that's what your study itself says,
Yes.
are extremely narrow.
Okay. Then you can't say that it doesn't ever work.
Okay,
You
so
can make-
asterisk,
you can make
it
your
may work
personal-
under this very narrow set of conditions.
That's fine.
But it doesn't work in all these other set of conditions,
Okay,
which
then.
is what most of everybody else is out.
So let's
most
train
everybody
them
is
to
out
do
here.
it right.
So train people to do spanking right. That's
Yes.
your solution.
Yes.
How about
Why would
people?
that? Why
give
would that be
people
a
other
bad
tools?
solution?
Because it
Why would that be a bad solution? Hey, let's teach people how to use the tool correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what we should do?
I think part of it is I just don't believe it.
Okay.
But all right.
But I've got the evidence.
You do have the evidence, so whether I like it or not, I have to accept it. But I'm telling you that even if I think if you leave it open just a little bit, where we say you can do it, but you have to do it under this narrow set of circumstances, boom, you're going to get, this sort of mission creep, if you will, where people are doing
Suddenly
it.
Marshall doesn't like a slippery slope.
Right.
Suddenly Marshall's against slippery slopes.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is, especially when it deals with children and raising the next generation of future citizens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the idea of using aggression to, address aggression necessarily. It's not really the right tool. So,
see, Virginia, I kind of disagree when you say when kids are young, like 1, 2, 3 years old, they don't understand spanking. It's a Pavlovian thing. That's one of the few things that can be easily understood.
It's the classical conditioning.
It's one of the few things that can be easily understood. Is that, and that's why that's actually the age, when done right. That's the age to do it, so you never have to do it again.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's something. So I'm going to read her comment, and then I'm going to take off on a tangent.
I only saw the first
and bring
sentence. I only saw the
something
first
up.
sentence. Sorry. So.
Right. I'm going to read her comment, then I'm going to take this on a quick little tangent and pitch a question to you.
Okay.
When kids are young, like 1, 2, or 3 years, they don't understand spanking. In my view, I would redirect or give timeouts to them when they became older. Than that, speaking with them and giving them consequences, what I did or do. Like Claudia, I was overspanked and underspoke to. Now, here's one of the problems I have is the pro-spanking crowd looks at these other forms of discipline, and I think often correctly regards them as ineffective tools. For example, have you heard 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4?
Yeah. Counting never.
Don't do that.
Counting says I don't have authority. Counting says you don't have to listen to me the first time. I never counted with my kids on anything.
I hate that one.
Yeah, you don't count with it because all you're saying is you don't have to listen to me the first time. You don't ever have to listen to me the second time. You don't ever have to listen to me the third time because I'm actually going to do 2.5. You train your children to know that what you say is not what you mean.
Right,
Oh
which is
gosh.
why you issue a directive, and then if the directive is not followed, there's an immediate consequence.
Yes.
But it doesn't have to be spanking, but there does have to be an immediate consequence that follows.
And as they get older, they can understand the consequence, and you can come to an agreement. Even at 3, 4, 5 years old, they can start to understand. Hey, if you do this, then this will happen. But a child a child who's still sucking on things on the floor doesn't understand the idea of, well, if I do this, then that will happen. And what's the consequences of my actions leading into the next 2 days, or how is that going to, they don't understand that, but they do understand if they say no and their butt gets hurt, they're not going to say no anymore. Wow. It's a very simple Pavlovian understanding at that young age that is what's going to happen. Then once they know that they need to listen to you, then when they're slightly older, 3, 4, 5 years old, and they already know that they should be listening to you, then what you say is actually heard and understood because they already know to listen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, what about the whole timeout thing? Because that's another thing. We're going to give little Johnny a timeout, and somehow that's going to correct Johnny's behavior.
In certain things, it can work. I mean, it depends on the kid. When I was a kid, it probably wouldn't work on me because I liked being alone away from everybody. So timeout, okay, cool. I'll just other kids who
No, please don't send me to my room.
Yeah, other kids who are active and always need to have to do something, a timeout is just going to, okay, I'll never do that again. I don't necessarily don't believe in timeouts. I think I think that's a tool that can be used. Depends on the kid, depends on their personality, depends on what they did, depends on, okay, well, I told you, you're not supposed to be watching TV at this time. You were, so now you're going to be in timeout without the TV facing the wall over there and be bored out of your mind for 10 minutes. Whatever it is, it can work when they're at an age that they understand that was the consequence of what this is, and it's able to be understood. Are there more comments here that I'm missing here?
Generally positive comments. So,
yes. Yeah. I saw that one. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Josh. Said we're good parents. I really appreciate that. I hope that's true. I know that's true for Marshall.
I had another punishment that doesn't work. Using homework and reading and writing as a form of punishment is, to me, that's almost as bad as spanking. Don't do that because
don't do that.
You train the child to hate reading, to hate writing, to hate their studies.
Don't turn their chores into punishment.
Yes, using chores as punishment. It's one thing to say you're going to do this chore.
You still have to do them, yes.
But yes, using chores is, yeah. So here we are on a valid answer. We're taking away all of your punishment tools. We're saying you can't use this, you can't use this, you can't use this. Look, it's a free country. You can do whatever you want. You are still allowed to spank your kids, but what we're trying to do is inform you and say, based on our own experiences and based on the scientific studies that we've looked at, there are better ways to discipline and raise your children. And again, I'm going to keep coming back to this. I really think the secret to having good, well-behaved kids is consistency.
Consistency. I learned this from my dad when he was a high school teacher, and it's always it's even with high school students, just lay out the rules. Yep. This is what's happening. This will be the consequence. And then when it's broken, well, you knew it, right? You knew the rule. Okay, well, this is what I have to do now. If I don't do this, now I'm inconsistent and you can't trust me.
Right.
This is what I have to do. Even at the point where one day, I mean, it was years ago, one day we're like, Jennifer was like, okay, well, just for right now, you kids just kind of do whatever you want. I'm going to go. And she went to gone for like 20 minutes. She comes back into the kitchen and one of my children is on top of the refrigerator for whatever reason. And she was like, you know what? I did say you could do whatever you want. I did. Well, going forward, let's not get on top of the refrigerator. But she understood the idea. Like, I can't punish that because technically I really did say that you could do that. And that was my bad. So, I don't know. It must have been like 7 or 8 years old or something like that. I can't remember. I don't even know how he got on top of the refrigerator. But it was just one of those, if I don't clearly lay out what it is, and I think there's been times like that, Gabriel, you can, even as teenagers, where it's kind of like, okay, I really don't want you to do that, but I didn't explain to you that I didn't want you to do that. So going forward, this is not going to happen anymore. Right now, let's go ahead and stop. But it's that consistency. It's the consistency, and the consistency has to start early.
And we have to let kids. I like the idea of drawing boundaries and say you can do whatever you want within the confines of these boundaries, which is what your wife did there in that example, more or less. And she realized the boundaries were a little too liberal and need to bring them in. Yeah. I like the idea though of letting the kids do things like make messes and get into things sometimes. Yeah. There have been many times when I've looked at my son making a mess in the yard, like getting sand and stuff everywhere and other things, doing things that had I done these things as a child, I would have been severely punished.
Wow.
But I look at it and I realize my son is learning. He's experimenting. He's banging pots and pans together. Yeah. He's doing things. He's doing something, and something might break, but as long as he's not going to be hurt, and whatever it is isn't really something of value, he's picking the fruit off the tree before it's ripe. Oh, that's really frustrating. But nonetheless, he's learning and exploring. And so we have to let kids, I think, get away with certain things. We have to draw certain boundaries. Yeah. I like your boundary. Disobedience is unacceptable. Yeah. But on the other hand, making a mess in the yard, we might just let that go because you're going to benefit from the experience even as a toddler. You're going to learn.
Hey, before we lose the comments, going up a little bit, Claudia said something, but I can't see the rest of what she said.
She said she doesn't want her children to fear her. I still can't even comprehend why I got whipped so much.
Gotcha. I didn't know if it went on.
So again, there's a lot of parents out there who are they're not using the tool even in the narrow way suggested by your own evidence.
But my question is, all right, my question is, if that tool of spanking was removed from them, do you think they would be any better parents than what they were doing?
I think
is it a problem of the parenting style more than it's the tool?
I think so.
So
I do think so, but I think the problem with the tool is the tool can be overused and the tool can be the wrong fit. So I don't ever want to condone the use of the tool.
Okay.
Even if the tool can be applied in a very narrow set of circumstances, I really think the slippery slope. And the reality is most people aren't going to use the tool properly. I would just as soon not have that tool in the box. Because I really think if you've got parents who are going to spank according to a very specific criteria, these are also parents who are going to do what you've done and what I've done, which is be fair, firm, and consistent. Yes. Always be there and apply the correct tools.
But I believe also on top of that...
And that spanking isn't being done in a vacuum.
No, and I believe, but I also believe on top of that, when you are parenting right, it is an effective tool that brings positive results. Just like you have that one tool that you need to do that one thing. That one tool is that one tool in our household was necessary for disobedience. So that now I have teenagers who cannot understand or fathom the idea that they can say no to their parent. Like literally, like, yes, they say no. I don't want, and it's like, hold on, this is what we're going to, okay.
It'll be interesting.
To literally stand face to face and be, no, shut up, Dad. Like that doesn't happen. Does that happen in our household?
No.
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. It will be interesting to see how our 4 children grow up and when they have children of their own.
Yes.
What discipline techniques they use in their households. And I guess that's the final exam.
Yep. Wow. Yeah, and we'll see how that works out.
And what retirement home they pick for us.
Right? No, never mind. Yeah, that was gonna go different direction that doesn't need to go to. But hey, man, this has been a great discussion. I want to thank everybody out there. I don't want to miss any names, but I see on here Claudia, Virginia, Josh, and whoever else was commenting on there. Thank you so much for joining in our conversation. Continue talking after the show is over. As you can see, there's different viewpoints between left, right, conservative, liberal, pastor, atheist,
Christian,
all that, Christian,
all that,
non-believing, And again, I say non-believing. You should always challenge me on that phrase. Because anyway, we've talked about that before. But the idea is, yes, we have disagreements and everything like that, and even on such an important issue as this, we can come to terms and come to agreement with certain things. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. We're here every Sunday night, 5 o'clock, kerncast.com. Find us on Kerncast on Facebook. Search for A Valid Answer on Facebook and also A Valid Answer podcast on iTunes. Until next week, I'm Scott.
I'm Marshall.
This has been A Valid Answer. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.